Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ad Project Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Shellard from Ad Advance, and today I'm joined by Mr. Sean Morgan. Sean, it's awesome to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks. It's been a few months, I think.
Yeah. So for people who didn't get introduced to you, maybe a really quick introduction. Like, we've kind of gone through it before, but yeah.
Sean Morgan. I'm on the programmatic side at Ad Advance, mostly focused on display, working with DSP. Been at a couple different agencies around the Duluth area, mostly e-com, some healthcare stuff, but first foray into Amazon with Ad Advance a few years ago, and enjoying it.
Yeah, and Sean is our resident soccer coach, dealing with the sore hip from playing yesterday.
Yeah, we're in a little bit of pain, but we'll soldier through.
So today what we want to talk about is whenever anybody hears Amazon ads, people immediately think of sponsored ads and traditional retail media where you're showing sponsored ads when people do product searches. But what a lot of people miss is the power of these first-party data sources and how you can use them off of Amazon. And before we get into specific use cases, just trying to paint the picture here. A couple years ago or a year ago, there was the iOS 14 update, major privacy update that Apple rolled out, and it essentially didn't allow cross-app tracking on iPhones. There's been a lot of other updates, and Apple's been one more kind of at the forefront of this and pushing some of the changes. But in terms of like removal of the cookie, like the cookies being phased out. So there's a lot of different privacy and tracking updates, which makes it harder for third-party data like aggregators to be able to utilize that in the advertising space. And so what's happening now is that a lot of the advertising spend is shifting to those who have first-party data, meaning you had to log into their platforms. And Amazon is one of those big platforms. And so overall, when we look at this, like big picture, Amazon has a lot of audience data, and they also have this third-party distribution network, which a lot of people are not familiar with. And so what we wanted to talk about is kind of a cool use case where we're using this to advertise products that are not sold off Amazon. These are physical products. And using Amazon's ad platform to advertise for them off of that. And kind of the key things that we've had to work through on that, like the struggles we've had, tracking, how you have to do that, all that good stuff. And so wanted to have Sean on the podcast to kind of talk through all these different pieces and lay out a perspective on how we're looking at utilizing Amazon advertising off of the platform. So I don't know, Sean, you kind of want to introduce us to the case and we can go from there?
Yeah. So they predominantly sell completely off Amazon. I think they're in a number of brick and mortar stores as well. But we're super interested in kind of opening up another avenue of advertising, having currently, kind of focused all their efforts on Meta and Google. And just like to your point that you made about, tracking changing and privacy updates and kind of cookies going away and depreciating. I still think that there's a lot of value in advertising on Meta and Google. I think Amazon's data will become more and more valuable, moving forward, if not it already has. But so they just wanted to dip their toes in, basically, kind of run some tests, see how things went as far as the targeting, and then hope to expand from there. But yeah, run into a few issues kind of off the bat, and just with different creatives that have to be created for Amazon's DSP versus what folks are running on Meta and Google, slightly different as far as sizing and weighting and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then all the tagging, tracking that goes along with it, so that you can get data passed back to Amazon to build audiences that are going to be valuable to target moving forward.
Yeah. And as we look at, as the digital landscape is continually shifting, like Google is another one of those major first-party data sources. I think like everything that I do on my Android phone is tied into Google's data sources, and Facebook with their huge platform, Facebook, Instagram, Meta, which is formerly Oculus. I've got my Oculus Quest for VR. Lots of different stuff there. So there's a ton of great feeds, but it seems like the data overall is aggregating into some of these major first-party sources, and Meta and Google are definitely a couple one of those. When we look at advertising for folks off of Amazon, a couple things that we've taken for granted just on the sponsored side is all the tracking that goes along with it. So we don't have to program in tracking codes after for the, like to say, to track a conversion, because it's already within Amazon's ecosystem. In terms of getting audience data in, we also kind of take that for granted. If somebody does a search on Amazon, we can target that. But now trying to find different folks on who to target, there's other layers of complexity there. So I don't know, where should we start? Should we start on the audience side and some of the benefits and the ways that you've looked at that, and then maybe we move to the tracking, or how do you want to start? How do you want to frame it up?
Yeah, we can start with the audience and then tracking. I think they both tie together. It would be easy to segue between one and the other.
Sure. Yeah. Start on the audience side.
But yeah, audience side, obviously you've alluded to, there's so much first party data out there that we can get really granular or go really broad with targeting, depending on what we're trying to achieve. But one of the most valuable pieces about non-endemic and using Amazon's platform DSP to advertise is that we can basically build audiences off of whoever's been to your website, different pages. You can segment it out in multiple different ways, so you can really kind of tell the whole story of your brand to new to brand customers that maybe haven't interacted or seen it before, but that there's interest there.
Sure.
So yeah, you can keep it as broad as just put in a tag to track user movement across a website on just the page level. So I want to see how many people went to a home page, a landing page, a product page, so on and so forth. And you can build pretty broad audiences off that. It's just people that are browsing.
Sure.
And then you can go even more granular, I guess, step by step. You could tag specific buttons on the site, so you only want to build an audience off users that have clicked a button specifically. It could be add to cart, it could be completing a purchase. Again, those are different pieces that you can segment out. It could be viewing more information on certain products, and you're then retargeting people with that exact product that they viewed previously. So multiple different ways to segment it out, but I think that's a piece that is really valuable, because you can show different creatives to people at different parts of their purchase journey, depending on whether or not they've already purchased. So you can basically start with a brand ad, and that someone's accessed the website but they haven't purchased.
Yeah.
And take them the whole way through, depending on what they've viewed. So if they're only viewing, say it's men's shoes, you would only want to retarget them with men's shoes. Or you can, depending on how you've tagged the website, you could show them a specific shoe that they viewed in the last 30 days or 90 days or however long the look back that you want to add to your audience when you build it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different possibilities, I guess, with what you can do and what you want to achieve. It depends on your strategy, but yeah, super valuable. I guess with the tracking piece, it's probably folks that are advertising heavily on Google and Facebook should be pretty familiar with pixels and tagging.
Exactly. It's newer to us and it's not newer to us, but we take it for granted on the retail media side, where you don't have to do this most of the time.
Yeah.
So then when you do have to do it, it feels a little bit more painful just because we don't have to do it every time. Yeah. But as you develop that formula and figure out the ways where you want to tag the individual pages and kind of the flow as you go along, the nice thing is that it gets a lot easier over time.
Yeah, definitely. But Amazon had a pixel that was recently depreciated, switched everything over to what they call their advertising tag, basically ad tag. So it's basically just a snippet of code that you place in the header of a web page that you want to track where you want it to fire, and then 10 different conversion events like pre-selected that you can switch in and out. So if you just want to track page views, you're literally just changing 2 words within that snippet of code.
Sure.
If you want to track off Amazon purchases, if you want to track specific product page views, like they're 10 presets, but they're also somewhat customizable, just so you as the end user kind of know what you're tracking. But I guess one of the pieces that folks might run into is when you want to get really, really granular with what information is passed back through the ad tag.
Yeah.
So whether that's a specific product purchase, a price point, the total amount of a specific sale, or say someone bought 4 different products on this website, and you only want to track specific brand purchases from that website, you could segment out and use the tag basically to pass specific values back. One of the kind of nuances, I guess, is that it's much easier to build those out in Google's Tag Manager
Sure.
than what it is on the Amazon side.
Sure.
And that's one of the pieces that we've run into recently, where we've kind of taken the approach that like it is a lot more. I think the tagging piece on Google is a lot more robust. So you're basically just taking Amazon's ad tag and importing it into Google Tag Manager, and then you can create any number of events and attributes that you want to track. Amazon's is kind of somewhat limited to just the 10 presets.
Sure.
You can get super granular with what you want to do in Tag Manager and how you want to tag things. Like, it's basically open to any element that's on a website. You can call from a data layer, just basic PHP information, like on the website itself. Like, you can call specific attributes off and pass them back. So, those pieces I think are definitely valuable if you want to get really in the weeds.
Yeah.
And depending on how much traffic you get, is it worthwhile? Like, a website with 50 sessions a day, it's probably not worthwhile to go that deep. But
Yeah.
Websites with a lot of traffic and you want to get specific on how you want to target people and retarget to people, it's definitely valuable to have more information than less.
Yeah. So let's talk through some specific use cases and kind of how we would set this up. So one that we talked about was inputting an existing customer list in. So like a hashed list and creating an audience off of that.
Yeah.
Kind of walk through that process. What does that look like? What information do we need there?
Yeah, I believe hash list it's basically just a collection of email addresses and information from customers that they've inputted on your website to basically check out with or subscribe to your newsletter or whatever it may be. But I think there's 5 elements that are needed. It's first, last name, address, email, and phone number. You take your sheet. I think Amazon requests a minimum of 20,000 records. So that's your minimum.
Sure.
Hash the list through a tool within Amazon's DSP, and then you upload the list basically.
Yeah.
And what it does is that it matches your list from people that have inputted information on your e-com site to active Amazon accounts with the same email address.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can build audiences, lookalikes off of that list based on whether or not those matched Amazon users have been active in the last 6 months.
Sure.
And I believe active is just a view or a purchase. It's not limited to just purchases. So again, super valuable because these are people that you're basically taking a hash list of your ideal customer because they've been there, they've purchased before, and you're saying to Amazon like, hey, these are all the people that have been on my e-com site. Give me people that look like this, that have the same attributes, that are more likely to purchase from my brand.
Sure.
And again, with the lookalikes, there's, depending on what strategies you're using and what you want to achieve, there's 5 different, it goes from pretty broad to pretty similar,
Yeah.
basically, and anything in between. If you think of a Venn diagram, I think that's how it's presented in ADSP. So, yeah, super, super valuable because, essentially, you're getting in front of people immediately, and
Yeah.
they're going to be the closest, more or less the closest customers to people that have already purchased. So you're still going after new to brand because you can still, basically exclude everybody with that email.
Everybody who's previously purchased already. Yeah.
So Yeah, super valuable.
And one thing that's really valuable with this, and it all comes down to the first party data itself, is yep, you can build lookalike audiences in other advertising platforms too, and they can be great. The key benefit with doing it in Amazon is, all right, you input your hash list, and it tries to link up individual users. But the key difference is after that. So if they can link it up and they say, all right, Joe bought from this area, and okay, I can see that he's also interested in this. Here's all the interests he has. Here's a person who looks a lot like Joe. The key value with Amazon is that they have all this awesome purchase history.
Yep.
And so the indications on what people are interested in are so much stronger than, say, somebody like Meta that's trying to take social browsing behavior and tie that to purchase intent. And I think that's the key thing. It's like, yep, lookalike audience exists in a lot of other platforms, but it's the power in being able to be so close to the purchase that you can get a much better picture on what people are truly interested in to find higher quality lookalikes.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, depending on how granular you really want to go and how much traffic is actually coming to your e-com site, like you can segment a hash list and then create lookalikes off that hash list that you've segmented for specific brands that you want to advertise to people, within your site.
Sure.
Like say you sell a couple different lines of products. I only want to use this hash list of people that have purchased from X brand, and then create a lookalike just for purchasers of X brand that, there's multiple different ways to do it.
Yeah.
You could have a hash list of everybody on your website that's 60K strong, or you could segment that out where it's, 20, 20, and 20.
Yep.
Or, any which way you want. So again, super valuable information. And I think from some of the ones that we've ran, there's been really positive performance. So I'm hoping that it stays that way moving forward.
Yeah. And so if we look at all right, so for this example, they've already got retargeting set up from Google or Meta.
Yep.
And so, for retargeting itself, there's not a huge advantage using Amazon over the other competitors because, if they visit the site, you're showing them ads off the site. So a key benefit is maybe just more reach where you're getting the Amazon specific properties overall. So how specifically are you using Amazon's DSP for this off Amazon seller? What area you focus on? It's focused more on upper funnel, more new to brand, right?
Yeah, pretty much new to brand only. It becomes a little bit tricky when you're working with obviously three kind of different platforms.
Three walled gardens.
Yeah, and there is no clean solution to deduplicate or, and kind of clean that data up when conversions come through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely a piece that we've kept in mind, and you try to mitigate as much as possible. But yeah, mostly upper funnel, mostly going after, new brand new customers basically is what we're trying to do. And
sure.
I think that I know there was a little bit maybe a hesitation or a few questions around the amount of crossover targeting that might occur between the three platforms. Even though you're using Amazon's data, obviously those customers they may still spill over into different buckets as far as advertising goes. They're being targeted new to brand on Facebook without us really knowing whether or not we're targeting them new to brand on Amazon.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that's maybe one nuance. I guess the other nuance too is that you want it to be truly new to brand.
Yep.
You have to exclude past purchasers. We've kind of used a hash list and, through tagging, been able to build an audience big enough where we can exclude past purchasers from the point that we set up the ad tag.
Sure.
So unfortunately, it's not retroactive to, any given timeline before, whether that's 180 days or 365 or anything like that. So you're really only excluding people from the point that you set up the ad tag moving forward, which I guess is where the hash list does come in pretty handy, because you can take, 60, 70, 80,000 strong hash list and exclude all of those people from advertising, period.
Yep.
So yeah, just trying to drill down, I guess, into who is truly new to brand and what is the cost to get new to brand customers to the site to make a purchase, and then from that point, try and measure lifetime value.
Yep. Yep. And that's one of the challenges, especially as these privacy updates continue to roll out, is you end up with these different walled gardens of advertising. So we've got Amazon, Google, Meta. One of the issues is for ad attribution. So say we set up a new to brand ad based off of a lookalike audience from a hash list. We get this person to come to the site, and now they start seeing retargeting ads from Meta and Google, and then they go and complete a purchase. The Amazon ad is going to show a conversion. Mm-hmm. The Meta ad is going to show a conversion, and the Google ad is going to show a conversion. And so this is where you have to be really careful too when you're talking about conversion metrics. It's making sure that we have these different advertising, these audiences segmented out as much as we can so there's not overlap. And so at least like from the Amazon side, we could look at this from a new to brand perspective and say, okay, these attributed ads, like we're not doing retargeting with Amazon because of this. We could say, all right, these folks who came in, they're pretty much going to be all true new to brand. Yep. The Google and the Meta retargeting, they may be taking credit for some of those new to brand, or maybe they help push those folks across the finish line too. But it's just one piece that Sean's really worked on with this account, is taking a step back and making sure that we're getting the best measurements that we can. And then with those measurements, we're making the right right calls on like the true incrementality or the true impact of our ads versus just taking attributed ads from all three platforms at face value.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most uncomfortable piece of using it with other avenues. I definitely think that it's probably the best thing to have multiple touch points for your brand. So if you're advertising on Meta, Google, and Amazon, I think that's ideal, to be honest. It just becomes tricky when you have to de-duplicate conversions and everybody's trying to take credit for the same thing.
Yep.
But yeah, I think again, super valuable as far as like how you can kind of segment out, build audiences, and not just use them to target, but use them to exclude. You know, you can really get granular with the types of customers that you're trying to go after. You know, and that's just only using, you know, your own data from your own website.
Sure. Like,
that's not to say that like we haven't built in any sort of in-market lifestyle targeting from you know, that's first party from Amazon, mm-hmm. and excluded our own purchasers in the last 365 days, or viewers of certain product pages, or people that have landed on a page prior. You know, you can really get pretty deep with that stuff as well.
Sure.
And you would like to think that with those exclusions, depending on what way you've set it up, like there's probably a pretty high likelihood that the people in those in-market and lifestyle buckets that you target, whether or not you layer demographics as well, they're probably new to brand.
Sure.
And ultimately, that's kind of the goal here.
Yep. Yeah. So just to go back and summarize, so even if you're not selling on Amazon, you can still tap into the first party data and use Amazon advertising. And this is continually being more and more of a focus for Amazon, especially as like sponsored ads on their platform. They can't add too many more. And so now it's like, how else can we use this information to drive ad revenue? And one of the great ways is for folks who are not selling on Amazon to be able to tap into that. And with that adds complexity of adding these different tracking tags where you have to have multiple different like touch points where it's firing throughout. But if you set it up right, now you can build different audiences based off of each of those and then use those to either exclude or include into certain different ad types. So those on like the Meta and the Google side will definitely be familiar with this. But one of the key benefits with the Amazon's platform is just how close they are to the purchase data when you're building audiences. And so this can be a great add-on if you're using Google and Meta, or if you're not, this can be a great spot to start to. Like Sean said, saying some of the trackings, it's a little bit trickier. It's a little bit more in its infancy, but continually being built out. And so I'm sure it'll get better over time. So there's definitely some challenges there. But this is a great platform to kind of add into the mix overall if you are really spending a lot on digital ads, like I would consider the Amazon ads platform. Unfortunately, many people just hear Amazon ads and they don't think that it's an option. So before we wrap up, any other things to add or things people should know?
I guess the only piece that I would highlight too, if you are thinking of doing this, is like you want to give yourself enough lead time when you set up any tags, because it is going to take some time to build audiences big enough for you to use. Amazon does have certain thresholds in place where, as far as matching active users on the platform to any hash list or building lookalikes off that list, or a certain amount of tag fires have to occur before you can build an active audience. So you want to give yourself enough lead time into that to build those audiences to be able to use them in targeting down the line. And I think I also mentioned that it wasn't retroactive to any point prior. Like when you implement the tag, it's only going to be tracking data from that point. So definitely give yourself a little bit of time before you start setting up any orders or anything like that.
Yeah. So that's one final point. If you're thinking of potentially implementing this, setting up tracking early is great, and you can just let it run in the background and start to gather that data. So then when you are ready to go, you've got those audiences already built out.
Yep.
So, well, Sean, awesome having you on the podcast. And as we keep learning more and digging into this more, we'll be sharing key pieces on what we're learning on this side. So make sure that you're following our content, subscribe to the mailing list. You can go to adadvance.com, or you can check us out on social platforms like LinkedIn. Sean, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And for everybody who's listening, as always, really appreciate you joining this podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Ad Project.